Hello and welcome to the Dominion Plunder full set first impressions, or to my full set first impressions. I am traveling as I record this. I am not recording it on my normal home setup, so the quality may be a bit dodgy. Apologies for that if so, but I wanted to uh, do this if I could, and I figured out a way to do it. So that way I get to give my raw first impressions while also getting to play with the cards sooner than a week from now. So yeah, I may break this into multiple parts depending on what's going on and how long it takes me, but let's get started. So first card we have here is Cage. 2 cost treasure duration. Set aside up to 4 cards from your hand face down on this. The next time you gain a victory card, trash this and put the set aside cards into your hand at end of turn. Okay, you know what? This is actually more like what I was talking about on preview day. I think it was 3, the one that was next time, where I was saying it would be cool to have something where the trigger was a little bit more under your control. It wasn't something that was like almost always going to happen right away, or you know, going to be very difficult to trigger. Like it was going to be something that's sort of in between. You can kind of choose, like, do I want to trigger it now? Do I want to trigger it later? And this definitely qualifies, so that's cool. I like that. Um, so one way you could definitely use this is as a form of thinning, right? You could, uh, just grab one of these early, set aside your estates, and then, um, well, I mean, you'd have to have them in hand with this to be able to do that. So, like, how well that works out, I don't actually know, or how likely that is to work out, or like what the timing would. I guess I do know how likely it is to work out if you open it, like, which is not particularly likely. But how can you get this set up early enough to make it worth doing that? I'm not sure. But then the point is that later you could, um, maybe you have at some later point more deck control, and by the time you're ready to green, you're also ready to have those cards come back into your deck. It's probably that's not really the best timing for that to happen. It's like, oh, I take a province and I also take 3 estates. It's a little dubious, but maybe that works out. So yeah, thinning, one option. Another option for this would be to try to set up some kind of mega turn thing. So you like set aside. Oh, you get several of these, set aside a whole bunch of cards, and then at some point you play Groom to gain an estate or whatever, and you put all that stuff in your hand. So at that point, it's more like a native village mat type thing. Only you have more control over it. Native village, using a native village mat to do like a mega turn, or at least like a big turn, is certainly like a thing you can do and has been done, but it's not very easy because you don't generally have much control over what you're setting aside. But here you would. So that could be a thing. Essentially it acts as a form of delayed draw that way. I don't know how often that's going to come up. I guess if you, like, for instance, if you have like Bridge or Horn of Plenty, or Bridge Troll, one of those Megaturn type cards, and you have actions but you don't have draw, that would be probably like the best use case for that sort of thing. You do have to set aside cards from your hand, so you're not going to get to play whatever it is that you're setting aside. So, I imagine if you're setting aside good cards, it could be pretty slow to do this, but it might still be worth it. Overall, it doesn't seem like a very good card, certainly, but I'm sure it will find some uses. And like if you can find a way to use it for early tempo, like setting aside several things, I think it like that could well be worth it, even if it's not permanent thinning. The question is, how do you do that? And that's not entirely clear to me, right? I mean, I guess you could open with this and like a draw card and hope to line things up, but it seems in the typical case like you're still not very likely to find like what you want. I mean, I guess maybe you get multiples and you one time you set aside estate 3 coppers, or okay, we're apparently getting kicked out of the card list page. Cool. I don't know what that was about. Yeah, this might be a little rough, like I was saying. But anyway, what is that little artifact? I have no idea what's going on with this little box here. Anyway, so maybe you get multiples of these, and the first time you set aside an estate or two, and the next time you set aside the rest of them, and you set aside good chunk of your coppers, and you're like, okay, that's that works, something like that, which is not too dissimilar to what you might end up doing with a card like Banish. Obviously, like Banish is going to be a stronger effect, and the order in which that happens is different because you're going to do it like all coppers then all estates, or the other way around. But the point is that you often don't banish all 7 coppers. You banish a good chunk of them, and you're like, that's good enough. So you might end up doing something similar with this card. But yeah, I don't think it's particularly strong. Probably pretty weak, in fact, but it could still be nice if you can get some tempo out of it early. And then, like I said, there's probably some mega turny, or at least big turny things that you can do with it. Maybe you do gain in play with this later in the game to set up like a big next turn, especially if you're like, and it's a little hard to be doing gain in play when you are short on actions, but if you are somehow able to do that, like you have non-terminal draw, but you don't have terminal space, you can like gain one of these, set aside some terminals, and then buy some villages or something like that. Anyway, wait, put the set aside cards into your hand at end of turn. What does that actually mean? I just realized I didn't. Does that mean, I have to imagine that means like in the same, like when you draw 5 cards, then you put the cards into your hand. So it's for your next turn. Yeah, that must be what it means. I was thinking it would be at the beginning of your next turn. But I guess if you're trashing this thing immediately, I mean, it could have said, the next time you gain a victory card at the start of your next turn, trash this. But I guess that would be a little wonkier wording wise. But yeah, this will be vulnerable then to like militia attacks and stuff like that, which is unfortunate. Yeah, okay. So next we've got Grotto. Plus an action, set aside up to 4 cards from your hand face down on this. At the start of your next turn, discard them, then draw as many, and it's a 2-cost action duration. So this is, more set aside stuff. So it's kind of like dungeon, in that like it's hand size negative the turn you play it, and then on the duration turn it's sifting. The nice thing about this though is that you can kind of guarantee, like if you're already drawing deck or coming close to it, you can kind of guarantee that you hold your junk cards out of your shuffle, right? You setting aside like your estates or whatever, and then you discard them and you draw those cards, like in the same way that it can actually make sense to top deck bad cards if you have dungeon in play, because you want to make sure that you get them out of the way immediately and that you don't like have to discard better cards and then draw the worst cards in your deck later in your turn. Like this sort of solves that problem, because you like, so long as you can find those cards in the first place with the Grotto, then you set those aside and you guarantee that they're like not in your deck at all. So that's actually a pretty nice effect. And early in the game, you could use this for spiking in a similar way to what you would do with like Church or Secret Cave. I mean, it's obviously it's not as good as Church because you don't get to trash, but And you don't get to keep the cards you set aside, but it doesn't really matter because the cards that you have at that point are, you know, relatively uniform. I mean, obviously, estate and copper, you're pretty different in terms of one making money and the other not, but still, if you see this turn three, you just set aside four cards, like the all four cards that you have. The absolute worst outcome is that you have four coppers, you set aside all four of them, and you chuck them, and then you see the seven remaining cards in your deck, which is going to be one of your. Well, I guess the absolute worst outcome is you see this with your other opening buy, and then it gets tossed. So with three coppers, and then you're going to see the seven cards, the remaining seven cards in your deck. So three estates, four coppers, plus two cards off the top, which means that assuming your other opening buy makes any money, you're still like guaranteed to hit five, and you're drawing. I mean, you're drawing up to nine. So you're like if you opened this and nothing, I guess, and you saw it turn three, you'd be guaranteed to hit six. You'd have a very good chance to hit seven, depending on, like, in practice, you'd have a very good chance to hit seven, depending on the distribution of, what am I trying to say? Like, depending on where your estates are on those, across, like, the first and second turn, you'd be very likely to hit seven. Like, you would know, I guess, what I'm trying to say is, like, in general, you'll have a good chance to hit seven if you do this. In particular, when you play it, you'll know, because you'll know how many estates you're setting aside, like how likely you are to hit seven. I mean, obviously, if any estates you set aside on turn three in particular, you're still going to have a chance to redraw. But if you set aside, you're going to see seven cards before you do. So if you set aside three estates, then you're guaranteed to hit seven. Anyway. So the point is, you can definitely use this to spike a high price point. And even if you do it on turn four, like normally, you want to see your durations on turn three, and you still probably do in this case if that's what you're getting this for. But if you do see it on turn four, you're going to trigger, you're going to, well, I guess, never mind. The junk is going to go into your shuffle. Okay, that's not so great. I mean, it's still going to be a pretty short shuffle, though. It's definitely not ideal that you discard the cards first, because you can see them again. But still, I mean, it is good if you happen to see your other opening buy, of course. So yeah, I mean, I think this card does have a role to play in the opening, which automatically makes it, like, better than it would be if it didn't. And then, later in the game, I think you can use it to really increase your reliability. So I actually think this card is probably pretty good. Like, better than I would have. Like, my very first reaction to reading this was like, this doesn't sound very exciting, but I mean, there's definitely going to be plenty of times when you don't really need or want to use the spiky part of this, and then it's like, well, okay, I don't really care. And of course, I've been describing it as if you need to set aside four cards, but you don't, right? You could just set aside two and then, like, not trigger a shuffle, for example. It's like if you see this and even if you see this and an estate and three coppers, and you get only, like, you're only increasing your hand size by one on turn four when you're buying a three on turn three, like, that's still potentially pretty useful. Right now, if you want some other two cost and you set aside two estates and you don't trigger a shuffle, then you are guaranteed to hit five without even accounting for what your opening buy is. Anyway, like, I think there's a lot of good stuff you can do with this in the opening, depending on what you're trying to do overall. So yeah, I think I definitely think this will see play. I mean, it's I don't want it's not crazy strong or anything, but it definitely seems playable to me. Seems better than Cage. All right, Jeweled Egg we have already seen, so let's talk about Search. Whoa, okay, we're seeing all the loot. Two cost action duration plus 2 coins. The next time a supply pile empties, trash this and gain a loot. Okay. Um, so this is going to stay out until uh, until a supply pile empties. So the this is kind of like an embargo replacement. I mean, obviously it doesn't do the whole putting a curse on a pile and all that stuff. But in terms of being like a one shot, two cost silver, terminal silver, uh, like this is another card I could definitely see being relevant in the opening, because if you have a 5/2, you're like, yeah, okay, I'll grab the one shot terminal silver, and like that'll be nice. And getting the loot later will probably be nice too if it happens. It won't always happen, but it'll probably happen, most of the time. How often does one pile empty in a game? Like other than province or whatever, probably well more often than not, at least. Um, and I mean, but I can also see it being something you gain in play, even if even if you never trigger the ability, like even if you gain this like after a pile is already empty and there's not really going to be another one emptying or whatever, like you know uh, depending on the composition of your deck, one shot terminal silver might not be too bad. Might just be worse than regular silver, and then maybe you don't get this. But I don't know. I think that mostly you're gonna like look at this in the opening, and then maybe look at it around the time the pile is threatening to empty, and you're like, okay, this is how I can get my loot, and then those are gonna be the two scenarios in which you care, and then after that, it's gonna be like, pretty ignorable. But that's all right for a two cost. It's a reasonable card. And sometimes it's going to be the only plus buy, right? Like you're going to have to get this in anticipation of this is going to be the only way to get plus buy. Although, of course, if there's no plus buy, then that potentially makes it significantly harder for any pile to ever empty. But obviously that there are exceptions to that if there's a workshop or whatever. All right, we've seen Shaman, Secluded Shrine, Siren, Stowaway, Taskmaster, and Abundance. But we have not seen Cabin Boy. 4 cost action duration, plus 1 card, plus 1 action. At the start of your next turn, choose one, plus 2 coins, or trash this to gain a duration card. Okay. Has some thematic similarities to Sailor, but isn't as good at his job so as the Sailor is. So I guess, well, he does draw a card on play, which Sailor does not do. But they both give the 2 money. He only gains the duration. He doesn't like put it into play for you, although the Sailor doesn't gain the duration. He also doesn't trash. Anyway, whatever. I don't know why I'm doing this comparison. They're not actually that similar of cards. So, on a board with like Wharf, like opening this seems like kind of a no-brainer, right? You just like, yeah, I want to get some wharves, and I could try to hit 5, but I can do this, and I might still hit 5 anyway because like it's not stopping me from hitting 5. I can just go like it's not a stop card. And I mean potentially, if it's like, oh, I could buy a wharf and keep my cabin boy, and I don't really want anything for 3, but with the 2 coins I can hit 5, I can buy it, then like, okay, that works too. So, in that kind of situation, this will be really nice in the opening. The duration money effect is like, as a non-stop card, is sort of like a slow activated conspirator. It's not that exciting. It might still be worth it for that some of the time, but probably not super often. I think you're going to definitely care more about this when you have the opportunity to use it as feast, duration feast. Um, but the fact that it's flexible, like that you can keep it around until like the best timing, definitely makes it a more appealing card in that respect than feast. Also, it's not a stop card. I mean, it is slower than feast by a turn potentially. It depends on obviously sometimes it isn't in practice. You play it on turn 3, you get the card on turn 4, and it gets into your shuffle just as quickly. But sometimes it won't. But it's as being not a stop card does a lot to offset that downside. So I think this will be opened reasonably often. I mean, if there's nothing that you want to trash it for, then I would not open it, because it's like, I mean, I guess it is going to be better at hitting like 6, for example, than like a silver because of the timing of the money. But if you don't see it on turn 3, then you don't actually see the money until turn 5, and so now you've lost the opportunity to have it contribute to your buys on turns 3 and 4. So it's not very appealing in that context. You really need something that you want to trash it into. But there are a lot of durations in Dominion. I guess the question is how many of them are 5 costs that you care about that much about. Like a Wharf, is a pretty singular example. I mean, maybe you want Barge or something. Sea Witch. Maybe would you do this for Haunted Woods? I don't know if you would. Um, you Ironically, if you trash this to gain a siren, it doesn't actually work. You could keep it in your hand and trash it to gain a siren, but you can't use this to gain a siren and have that work unless you have another card to trash. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, I think it's mostly going to come down to that question about the durations. The the duration money part is not very exciting. Okay, Crucible. But and yeah, it is really very similar to Feast in a lot of ways. Anyway, Crucible is a 4-cost treasure. Trash a card from your hand plus 1 coin per coin it costs. Okay, so this is just non-terminal salvager without the buy. Well, as an opener, it is arguably better than salvager. I mean, in the long run, you might want the plus buy, but early in the game, you probably don't care, and it's non-terminal, so you can open this with a terminal and not have to worry about terminal collision, so that's nice. I think like the plus buy and salvager is a pretty big deal for a couple of reasons. One is that like you sometimes it's the only plus buy, or there's limited buys at least, and while obviously on a completely thin deck, the salvager isn't really generating gains. In practice, if your deck isn't thin yet or never becomes thin, then it can generate gains in a relevant way. And in the late game in particular, when like salvager is like strong in the early game, strong in the late game, and sort of dips in the mid game, relatively speaking. But in the late game, when you can do things like salvage province to like empty the provinces, and like because you can buy another province, like this can't do that nearly as effectively, because if you salvage a province, you can buy that province, and you're not consuming resources that the rest of your deck needs to buy the other province or the other provinces or whatever. But this is because it doesn't give you the buy. So I think that is a pretty notable downside. Obviously, being terminal is also a downside, though. So, how does this compare to salvager? I would. How often do you want? In practice, how often do you want to use up your terminal space just to get a buy? on the one hand, I want to say not that often, right? Like Skulk is often a card, like Skulk attacks as well as giving you a buy, and yet it's often a card that you don't particularly care if you actually get to play or not, or like you're gaining it mostly to gain the gold and you don't, like you're fine with just like trashing it or whatever. But on the other hand, the synergy between the abilities on Salvager is quite relevant, which is kind of what I was saying already. So I think this will be ultimately worse than Salvager, although it is a better Copper Trasher for sure. It is a better Copper Trasher, just like because non-terminally trashing coppers even for no benefit is a lot more palatable than terminally trashing coppers for no benefit. Well, I mean, you get the buy. I guess that is the benefit. Yeah, I think Salvager is better, but I mean, this is going to be like similar-ish to Salvager for sure. All right, we've seen Flagship, Fortune Hunter, 4 cost action, +2 coins. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may play a treasure from them. Put the rest back in any order. Um. Okay, so this is like a kind of like a cross between Herb Gatherer and Navigator, I guess. Like, uh, it's giving you the 2 coins from Navigator. It's searching through the top of your deck like Navigator. Um, Playing a treasure, during your action phase like Herb Gatherer. I mean, there's other cards that do that too, but playing it out of your deck, not out of your hand, I would say. I think Herb Gatherer is the only other card that does that. Um, the like this does actually seem pretty good in the opening. Um, so if you see this on turn 3, you're going to realistically you're gonna get 3 coins with it. I mean, if you don't, you've already that means your hand is all coppers other than this, and you're already hitting 6 anyway. So like you can't complain too much if you flip 3 estates. I mean, you can if you really wanted to hit 7, but like you know, um, but yes, the point is it's gonna be good at like hitting 5 for sure because it's generally gonna generate 3 coins, and then on turn 4, um, while on the one hand it is going to like if you're using this to buy an expensive card that you want to play, it's going to trigger a shuffle, which is maybe not ideal because you don't want like the card that you're going to use this to buy to miss the shuffle. On the other hand, it's going to be a short shuffle that is going to have your turn 3 buy in it. So overall, that might still be worth it depending on exactly what you saw on turn 3. Like, I mean, if you only got to buy like a 2 cost or something or didn't buy anything, you might be sad, but there's going to be plenty of situations where you won't be sad. We'd be like, okay, I get to I already hit 5 last turn, so now I get this short shuffle where I get to see my 5 quickly. Um, I mean, you know, as payload goes, it is also. I mean, I guess it's worth noting, kind of not a stop card. Like, obviously, it's terminal and it's not actually drawing you a card, but it is putting a card from the top of your deck into play. So if you have a draw that you're playing after this, like that is a card that you didn't have to draw, assuming you found a treasure. So it looks like it's a pretty innocuous looking card, but I actually think it's pretty solid. Like as money payload cards go, it's it's dense, I guess is the way that I would put it. It's pure money payload is not necessarily the most exciting thing, but for a 4 cost, for something that you can like workshop, something that you can open with, you're not gonna want like a ton of these, but it's a pretty fast, cheap way to add payload, and kind of isn't a stop card, at least most of the time. So I think that's all pretty nice. And the deck inspection can be useful, in its own right too, right? I mean, if you have Wishing Well or Mystic or whatever, you can use this. It has some synergy with that. It has some synergy with, like Scrying Pool. Um, with chariot race. Like, I don't know. Like, how much does that really matter? Probably not very much, but it's something. Alrighty. Next up, we've got Gondola. 4 cost treasure duration, either now at the start of your next turn, plus 2 coins. When you gain this, you may play an action card from your hand. Huh. Okay, that's a little weird of an ability. So, I think, or I suspect the concept here with the below the line text is that you're going to be incentivized to pick these up even in situations where you wouldn't otherwise, because it allows you to like get a village effect. Um, and it is a village effect. So, it'll be fun seeing the boards where like this is the only village, and like how do you deal with that? Probably probably can't do too much with this is the only village, um but yeah, like the as a a sort of temporary like tempo village thing, I think that ability by itself will definitely have some value, even if the on play text is not exciting. And I mean, it's definitely not exciting, although the fact that you can delay the money if you don't need it now is nice. I mean, I said that about, I don't know, Amphora, I guess it was one of the loots. Um, Being able to choose when you get your money definitely has some value. Like, it's not that uncommon that the card that you should buy is less expensive than the amount of money that you have to spend on it. And likewise, this is yet another card that you can use to save up for an expensive thing. We're getting kind of a lot of those in this set. Um, so yeah, like those are nice abilities. If you were going to open with a silver with like double silver anyway, there'd be no reason not to take this card over a silver because it's just better. Um, Obviously that at that point the below the line text isn't doing anything. Like even if you have like Necropolis, or even if you have what's it um some inherited action, it doesn't really matter because like you could have just played it. It was on turn 1 or turn 2. You're not exactly having problems with terminal collision. But nonetheless, uh, I think yeah. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see this open fairly often just for that reason, because it's like, well, if I was going to open double silver anyway, I might as well open this. But I do think the below the line text is going to be the main reason to gain this card outside of that context. Um, and I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to build a deck that like is geared around this, with a few specific exceptions. Like the one that immediately jumps to mind is Way of the Turtle. So like if there's no other villages on the board, but there is Way of the Turtle, you can buy this and turtle. I mean, this is a 3 card combo, and it's never going to actually happen. But the obvious one is bridge, right? You use this and you turtle your bridge, and you turtle your bridge, and you turtle your bridge, and eventually you have a whole bunch of bridges turtled, and then you actually play them and you buy all the provinces. Kind of like a rogue carriage bridge variant. I mean, turtling bridges in general can be a thing, but like if there's no um, if there's no other villages, I mean, of course, turtle bridge by itself, like you can just turtle the bridges, but that can be difficult to do while still actually like buying things, right? Because now you're spending an action to do like nothing for your current turn. Whereas this would allow you to be like, okay, well, I can at least play like a bridge and then turtle another one or something like that. Yeah. So, or like even like play it draw card, maybe a terminal draw card. I don't know if that would actually make sense. But anyway, so there may be some kind of edge casey things like that where you can use this as the only village and actually like build around that as your primary mechanism um, for building. But that's going to be pretty rare, especially because as a treasure, like it's like having, you know, being able to sustainably gain these is going to be more difficult than even it would be with actions, and it wouldn't be easy with actions. Like, but there's more ways, like things like Way of the Butterfly, where you can like get an action back into its pile than one of these. I mean, I guess you know like there's you could trash it and then have something that can gain it from the trash, but again, there's more of those things with actions than with treasures. There are still some, right? Obviously, treasurer, rogue. Can grave robber gain this, or can it only gain actions? I think grave robber can gain this. It can only trash actions, but I think it can gain this. But anyway, I mean, if you're having to play a terminal action to gain this, though, then like you're not really making progress on your action space in any case. So like lurker, if you could lurk it, it would actually work, right? Because lurker is non-terminal, but all three of treasurer, grave robber, and rogue are terminal. So I don't think any of that will actually work without some other village effect. Anyway, so not probably actually a very strong card, I think. But definitely like situationally useful. I think it will definitely be worth taking these to put something into play, like some of the time. All right, Harbor Village, an actual, honest to goodness, +1 card, +2 actions village. Amazing. After the next action you play this turn, if it gave you coins, +1 coin. Okay, so this is like a worse version of, but also cheaper of Bazaar. So worse in the sense of like the effect is worse, not necessarily that it is a worse card. In fact, it's as a 4 cost relative to a 5 cost, it's probably better regardless of how likely it is to actually give you the coins, just because like having your village cost less than 5 is good. That being said, how easy is it going to be to activate this ability? I want to say generally not very, because like a lot of times what you do is you play your village and then you play a draw card, or you play your village and then you play another village. If your money payload is coming from treasures, you're generally not going to be able to activate this. Like, because you're going to play a village and then you're going to end your actions and play a treasure? Probably not. I mean, like there's exceptions like Crown, but it's rare. If you play Harbor Village, Harbor Village, Harbor Village, you don't activate it. If you have to play like a terminal money payload card or like an action card, then like that's not the timing that you want to be playing those, right? Like, so you're like, oh, I want to play Harbor Village, and then Sacred Grove or whatever, and then Smithy. No, that's not right. Like I want to play Harbor Village and then Smithy and then see what I draw. So I think this is going to be hard to activate. I think it is going to be like, I think it's probably going to be weaker than like Plaza like Plaza is going to be more likely to get activated. I mean, Plaza is only netting you money if you like either don't need the money that you're discarding this turn and you can carry the coffers forward, or if you have overdraw. Like, so its ability, or if you had, or like DTX would be the other thing with Plaza, but the Plaza ability is not that strong. For the most part. This one, but I do think this one is actually going to be worse. I mean, sometimes you're going to have Peddler, and then it's fine, but you still have to like sequence them to be getting the value out of each one of these. I mean, Plaza, of course, it's rare that you're getting the full value out of every Plaza you play either. the the other thing to watch out for is it matters like when the card gives you money. So like if you play this and then you play merchant, doesn't work because merchant only gives you coins later, not immediately. Similarly, if you play this and then you play like abundance, or you play the card we just looked at, whatever that was called, gondola, and then you take the coins at the start of your next turn, like I'm actually not totally sure rules wise that wouldn't work with gondola if you take the coins at the start of your next turn, but I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I think this one's going to be hard to activate. I mean, it's still a village, right? Four cost vanilla village is like a perfectly good card. You're going to gain it a lot because it's a village. So you know, it's really easy to over focus on the other text because that's like the differentiator, and lose sight of the fact that, well, it's still a village, so it's good. And it is good because it's a village. But as far as that, I mean, that's, everybody knows what villages do, so I don't really need to talk about that. Um, but yeah, I think this is going to be on the weaker side as far as four cost village bonuses are concerned. Like maybe it's better than walled village, maybe not. I don't know. I think it's probably better than walled village. Well, the walled village, the upside of walled village like doesn't come up that often, but it can be pretty nice when it does come up. I don't know. It's probably still worse than this. I do think Plaza is better. Like certainly Workers Village and Wandering Minstrel and the other like ones that are clearly good are going to be better than this one. Port will be better. I don't know. I don't want to try to go through all of them, but I think this is going to be like pretty far down that list. Anyway, we've seen Landing Party, so now let's look at Map Maker. Four cost action, reaction. Look at the top four cards of your deck. Put two into your hand and discard the rest. When any player gains a victory card, you may play this from your hand. Okay, so um, this is basically a moat, but it's a moat with some sifting. Hmm. I guess what it is an updated Oracle, right? Oracle, you looked at two cards and you could take them or discard them, and then if you discard them, you take the next two. Um, this you're looking at all four of the cards and you're taking two of them. So that is a stronger ability for you at the cost of not getting to attack your opponent, um, which is probably fine for the most part. Like the attack on Oracle was not really the selling point for the most part of that card. This is a four cost, right? So it's pretty expensive for being able to do that. I mean, the ability is definitely stronger than Oracle, like, but still, it's only increasing your hand size by one for the cost of a terminal action, which is not the best. Except it can be non-terminal. If another player gains a victory card, you can play this from your hand. Um, Obviously that's going to be vulnerable to militias and the like, but when are they gaining victory cards? I mean, usually in their buy phase, so usually they're not going to be able to militia you in their buy phase. This is, so this is going to have some Black Cat vibes where, I mean, you don't get cursed, so that's like a big difference, but you have to worry about the, like, oh man, should I really gain that estate or that duchy? Like if I didn't hit province, or do I not do that because I don't want my opponent's map makers to fire off? Um, and the map makers are going to be better than black cats at finding each other, right? Because of the sifting, you can. I mean, you got twice as much search space to try to find another map maker, put that into your hand, and then you get to react that too. So yeah, I think you know this is your primary draw is not going to be very compelling, but as something that you know add in, especially like later in the game. I think it will make sense, and you might want. I mean, you might want one or two of these just for like because the sifting will be useful like earlier in your turn, like before you have expanded your hand size as much with like potentially other draw cards, just to be able to find your villages and your draw cards. Um, so I think like opening this doesn't seem crazy. You are less likely to have terminal collision with it. You get to move through your shuffle more quickly, stuff like that. I mean, there can definitely be downsides to that, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be like a super strong opener or anything, but it could come up. But yeah, I think like the getting definitely the strongest case for this is going to be like the late game reaction thing, and that uh the fact that it doesn't curse the way that Black Cat does. I mean, I think overall it's going to be a weaker card than Black Cat, like for sure. It costs twice as much as well. Um, but it'll I think it'll still be like enough of a threat that people will have to like kind of play around it. Not like in terms of points, right? It's not going to stop your opponent from emptying piles, obviously. Um, but in terms of like more marginal decisions about gaining green cards, I think it will definitely have an impact there. So far, none of these cards that are new have seemed super strong to me. But let's keep going. Maroon. Trash a card from your hand plus 2 cards per type it has. Action, attack, etc. Interesting. Well, okay, so trash a card and draw 2 terminally is not something you can like build around the way you can build around like broker draw or apprentice draw, obviously, because it's draw neutral. But it's still like it's still good. Like you're gonna open with it because you can draw 2 off of a state and you can draw 2 off of copper, which is actually better than what those other cards can offer you. Um, Being able to trash multi-types to draw a bunch of cards is going to be like, it's going to be rare that is in any way sustainable, right? Like the the reason that you can do things like apprentice draw and have that be sustainable is because you have situations where you have like a gold gainer, but gold is a single type card. They're just the multi type cards are like generally not nearly as easy to gain in large quantities. Um, I mean, it's not impossible, right? Like you might have, I don't know, you might have sculptor, and then you might be able to like sculpt like a cage, right? Which is a 2 cost, and then you can trash and draw 4 cards, like, and sculptor gives you a villager, so it's non-terminal. So it like while the maroon is terminal, you're at least like you don't need too many more plus actions to make that work. It's still not like it's still like that's a pretty convoluted way of playing a smithy. um, and if both players are doing it, like how many times are you gonna get to do that, right? Like not too many. So like I don't think that's gonna come up very much, but I do think that just because it can trash and draw 2 like with all of your starting cards, it's gonna be a strong card regardless of that, right? Like the the upside here is less relevant than the floor. The floor is pretty good for this card. I mean, there will be cases where you're like, I'm gonna draw 2 cards. Like, I'd rather just have like the +2 coins that I get from like priest or whatever, because that way I don't draw my other opening by and have terminal collision and be sad. And in that respect, I do think it's like I do think Priest is probably just a better card in general than this card. But Priest is a very good card, so that's not like a huge knock. So yeah, I think this is a good card. This might actually be the best one that we've looked at so far. I mean, I guess Harbor Village might be just because it's a village. I don't know, but and again, not talking about the cards that we've already seen, but of the cards that are new today. I guess I don't know. I have some hopes for Grotto uh, as being a good card and Fortune Hunter, but I think this has got to be better than Fortune Hunter. Fortune Hunter is like more like a good for what it is type of card than I like just good card period. Okay, on to Crew. Plus three or five cost action duration plus three cards at the start of your next turn. Put this onto your deck. Well, that is like okay. It's like Highwayman, except we lose the action in exchange for having the draw come faster on both ends, right? Like Highwayman is duration draw, and then you discard it, which means you have access to it, but you have to get all the way to it. This is like okay, draw now, and then also next turn draw now. That seems really good. Like not you're not it's not always going to work out. You're not like always going to have a village in your hand or whatever, something you can draw, like you need to draw a card to see this. But still, like that seems really good to me. Like it's not exactly duration draw, but it's close to being duration draw while also being like draw now, which means it doesn't have the negative tempo that a lot of duration draw has. Yeah, this seems like a strong Smithy variant to me. Uh, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating like how good that like kind of scheme-ish effect is. But the thing with like scheme is like you have to have scheme. Like you have to. It takes work to get like that benefit and apply it to like whatever it is that you want to scheme. You have to spend gains on it. Like you don't have to do that with this. It just comes with the card. Like yeah, I think this is a very. I think this is probably. Is it stronger than? Is it stronger than Maroon? I don't know. It's again. You're comparing different things. Although Maroon actually does draw cards, so you're kind of comparing similar things, but also not really. But I don't know. I think this is a really nice card. All right, Cutthroat. 5 cost action duration attack. Each other player discards down to 3 cards in hand. The next time anyone gains a treasure costing 5 or more, gain a loot. Okay, so this is going to be less so of a card that you have so much control over the timing of. But it's cool that there's one where your opponent potentially has control of the timing of, to some extent. Uh, like that's an interesting design space. And yeah, so Militia, that is also a loot gainer. Militia as an effect, like, well, I mean, this doesn't come with the 2 coins on it, right? So Militia by itself as an effect is not really worth like a 5 cost terminal action. We can kind of see this in what's it called? Is it not Marauder, not Barbarian, but no, not Skirmisher. Damn it. I mean, Skirmisher is also a militia effect, but it's like a weird way of activating it. And it's a cantrip that gives you money. Also known as a peddler. What the heck is that guy called? I'm gonna have to look, aren't I? Ah, jeez. Feels bad. Apparently we're not loading images right now. this is an allies card, right? Not a 2E card. Oh my gosh. Total brain cramp. Maybe it is a 2E card. Hinterlands? What is going on with these images? Prosperity? Surely not. Oh, I think it's an allies, but what is it called? Oh, I'll just look through the cards, I thought. It's fine. I'll be able to find it. The guy with the 2 axes. Alright, whatever. I give up. So, part of the reason this is so frustrating is it's so rare that I can't think of the name of a card. Anyway, but yeah, like the thing that when you gain it, if you have an action in play, you can play it, and you gain a card costing up to 4. Like again, those are things that compare favorably, like quite favorably to Cutthroat. So the point is that Cutthroat really wants you to be gaining loot for it to be worth investing in, because terminal 5-cost terminal do a militia attack is like, I mean, the militia attack is strong, don't get me wrong, but it's not really generally going to be strong enough to justify this. And of course, because you need to gain a loot in order to get this card back, and because somebody needs to be gaining a treasure, it is going to be difficult to, in many cases, to like attack over and over and over, right? Like a lot of times you're only going to get a few attacks, and you're going to get a few loots as well, and that's pieces of loot, whatever, and that's like gonna be like it's you're only gonna play this a handful of times, but that's gonna be fine because it's gaining the loot, and that's what you want. There will be exceptions, like if Bandit Camp is the only village, then okay, here we go. Though at that point, you're probably drowning in treasure, and you're probably not playing this that often for that reason, because it's going to be hard to draw. But yeah, I think my expectation would be that this is on the weak side as far as like militias go. I think, however, as a loot gainer, it might be on the stronger side, because some of the loot gainers have not seemed that strong to me. And like, you're at the absolute most, this is going to give you 1 loot per turn, similar to Sack of Loot, but like the on play effect for this is definitely better than Sack of Loot, and it's a 5 cost, not a 6 cost. And it's actually easier to gain and play with this than with Sack of Loot, right? So because you're playing Sack of Loot in your buy phase, and this is okay, and I just got kicked off. God dang it. The image is still here. All right. Well, I'm going to finish talking about this card, and then I'm going to call this good for part 1. So, yeah, what was I saying? Sack of Loot, is like the pouch on play, aside from the loot gain, and then it's in your buy phase. And it's anytime you gain a treasure. So if you gain a treasure during your action phase, you will get the loot during your action phase as well. So it is easier to do gain and play with this. Yeah. So it also does potentially incentivize your opponent not to gain treasures, which like is in a way part of its like attack effect, right? Like it's like, oh, I don't really want to gain a treasure because then they get their cutthroat back and they get their loot and then I get attacked again. So that's that's like a interesting interaction. It's in that way it's like vaguely similar to something like Corsair, where you're considering like you're more pushed in the direction of a treasureless deck, except of course the cutthroat itself is encouraging you to gain treasures, to gain loot. So like if you want to be also playing cutthroat, um, now of course if both of you have your cutthroats in play, neither of them are gaining loot until there's some other card that get or there's some other treasure that gets gained to trigger them both. So the cutthroats themselves don't necessarily cause uh, treasures to be gained. And in fact, it might go the other direction, where once you both have a cutthroat in play, then neither of you wants to gain a treasure because you don't want the other player to get their cutthroat, depending on the timing of it, right? Because if you are having to buy a treasure, then your opponent is going to get access to the loot before you do, and they're going to get access to the attack before you do. So in that scenario, it's going to be like it's going to kind of be a treasure suppressor. But if you can gain treasures in your action phase, then that's going to be a different story potentially. Yeah. So, I mean, overall, I think, like I said, it's not a particularly strong card. I think it is probably a better card than most of the other loot gainers, though. Like, I would say it's going to be better than Sack of Loot. I would say it's going to be better than Jeweled Egg. Um, what are the other ones? I don't know. I'll have to be able to log back in to see that, which I'm gonna try to do, but I'm gonna wrap this video up first. So thanks for watching, and I will be back with part 2 of this after I figure out why I just got booted from the client. So until next time, which I don't know when that will be.